The bullet punched through my cabin door at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I know because I was staring at my father's pocket watch when the wood exploded 6 inches from my head. 12 years, 12 goddamn years of silence, and the world found me anyway. I hit the floor before my brain caught up to my body. The Sharps rifle was already in my hands, muscle memory from a life I thought I'd buried. Another shot came higher this time, wilder. Whoever was outside wasn't trying to kill me. They were panicking. Then I heard it. A child's scream, high-pitched, terrified. The kind of sound that cuts through blizzard wind and wood walls and 12 years of deliberate isolation like a hot knife through butter. And a woman's voice, hoarse raw, like she'd been screaming for hours. "Don't shoot. We're not armed. Please, my daughter's been hit." I stayed on the floor. My finger rested on the trigger. The storm outside was howling like the devil's own choir wind shrieking through the pines. Temperature dropping so fast I could feel it through the gaps in the doorframe. And someone had just put 2 bullets through the only barrier between me and the Wyoming winter. The smart play was to stay down, wait them out, let the mountain do what it does best, bury mistakes. But that child's scream, goddammit. I got to my feet slowly, rifle pointed at the door. My heart was doing something it hadn't done in over a decade. It was racing, not from fear, from something older. Something I'd tried to kill with solitude and silence and 12 winters of deliberate forgetting. Responsibility. I hate that feeling. I moved to the window, the one with the oiled paper I could see through if I pressed my face close enough. The snow was coming down in sheets, thick and wet and heavy. I could barely see 3 feet past the porch, but I saw them. 3 shapes, small, huddled. One was on the ground. I crossed to the door in 2 strides. My hand went to the bolt. I stopped. This was the moment where I could still choose to be the man I'd been for 12 years. The man who didn't open doors, the man who didn't get involved, the man who'd learned the hard way that helping people only led to blood and regret and graves you had to dig in frozen ground. The child screamed again. My hand pulled the bolt. The door swung inward and the storm came with it. Snow and wind hit me like a physical thing, cold so sharp it felt like knives. I kept the rifle up, barrel pointed at the 3 figures on my porch. The woman was on her knees in the snow, both arms wrapped around her belly. 8 months pregnant, maybe more. Her face was pale lips, blue eyes, wide with the kind of desperation that comes right before giving up. Behind her stood a girl, maybe 9 years old, tall and straight-backed despite the cold. She had her hands on the shoulders of a smaller girl, maybe 6, who was sitting in the snow with blood running down her arm. The woman looked up at me. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there that made my chest tighten in a way I didn't like. She wasn't begging, she was demanding. "We need shelter," she said. Her voice was steady despite the cold, despite the blood, despite everything. "Just for the night, until the storm passes." "No," I said. The word came out automatic. 12 years of practice. "Please," she said. But it wasn't a plea. It was a command dressed up as courtesy. "My daughter's been shot. She needs help. We have nowhere else to go." I looked at the girl on the ground, 6 years old, maybe less, blood soaking through the sleeve of her coat. Her face was white, lips trembling, but she wasn't crying. She was just staring at me with these huge, dark eyes that didn't look like a child's eyes at all. They looked old. "I've seen men," she said. The woman's voice cut through my thoughts. 3 of them, on horses. They've been following us for 2 days. They're the ones who fired the shots. We were trying to knock on your door when they caught up. I looked past them into the darkness, saw nothing but snow and shadow. "Why are they following you?" I asked. The woman's jaw tightened. "That's a long story." "I don't want a long story. I want you off my porch." The older girl spoke then. Her voice was quiet but clear, cutting through the wind like a blade. "My mother is 8 months pregnant. My sister has been shot. We have been walking for 6 hours in this storm. If you send us away, we will die, and you will have to bury us in the spring when the snow melts." I looked at her, 9 years old and talking about her own death like she was discussing the weather. The woman put a hand on the older girl's shoulder. "Harriet," she said softly, "don't. I'm just telling him the truth, Mama, the truth. I'd spent 12 years running from the truth, and here it was bleeding on my porch in the form of a 6-year-old girl with a bullet wound." I lowered the rifle. "Get inside," I said, before I changed my mind. The woman's face didn't change. She didn't smile or cry or thank me. She just nodded, once stood up with visible effort, and helped the older girl lift the younger one to her feet. They moved past me into the cabin, bringing the cold and the snow, and all the complications I'd spent 12 years avoiding. I scanned the darkness one more time, looking for movement, for shapes that didn't belong. For the men the woman said were out there. I saw nothing, but I felt them. I went inside and bolted the door behind me. The cabin was small, one room maybe 20 feet square, a wood stove in the corner that I'd kept burning low, a sleeping platform against the far wall, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with books I'd read so many times I'd memorized them, everything I owned in the world carefully arranged to accommodate exactly one person. And now, there were 4 of us. The woman had moved straight to the stove, positioning the wounded girl in front of it. The older girl was already pulling off the younger one's coat with practiced efficiency, moving like she'd done this before. Too many times before. I set the rifle by the door and crossed to them, the wound first. Everything else could wait. "Let me see," I said. The woman looked at me for a long moment, measuring, deciding whether to trust me. Then she nodded and stepped aside. I knelt in front of the girl. She watched me with those old eyes, silent assessing. I pulled back the sleeve of her dress gently. The wound was clean. The bullet had grazed her upper arm, tearing through cloth and skin, but missing anything vital. Lucky. If you could call any of this lucky. "You got a name?" I asked the girl. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The woman spoke from behind me. "Her name is Clara. She doesn't talk. Doesn't talk or can't talk. Can't. She hasn't spoken since her father died." I looked up at the woman. "How long ago was that?" 6 months. I looked back at Clara. 6 months of silence. I understood that better than I wanted to. I stood and moved to the shelf where I kept my medical supplies. Not much. Needle and thread. Bandages. A bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for emergencies that never came. Until now. I brought everything back to the stove and knelt again. "This is going to hurt," I told Clara, "but I'll be quick." She nodded once, solemn, like a soldier receiving orders. I cleaned the wound with whiskey. She didn't flinch. I threaded the needle and started stitching. Her hand gripped the edge of the stove grate so hard her knuckles went white, but she didn't make a sound. Just watched me work with those impossibly old eyes. The older girl, Harriet, stood beside her sister, one hand on Clara's shoulder, steady, strong. A 9-year-old playing the role of guardian because there was no one else to do it. When I finished, I wrapped the arm in clean bandages and sat back on my heels. "You're a doctor?" the woman asked. "No, but I've stitched enough wounds to know what I'm doing." The woman nodded. She lowered herself onto one of my chairs with visible effort, one hand pressed to her belly. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still haven't told me why 3 armed men are chasing a pregnant woman and 2 children through a blizzard." The woman looked at her daughters. Harriet met her eyes, nodded once. Clara's gaze didn't leave the fire. "Harriet," the woman said quietly, "there's a bedroll in my pack. Set it up by the fire for you and your sister." "Yes, Mama." Harriet moved without argument, hauling a worn canvas pack toward the stove. I watched her work, efficient, methodical. A child who'd learned early that survival meant being useful. When both girls were occupied, the woman turned back to me. Her hand went to her collar. She pulled out a small chain, and hanging from it was a badge, tarnished silver, the kind deputy marshals wore in the territories. "My husband was Deputy Edmund Bennett," she said, "out of Cheyenne." Was. I looked at the badge, then at her face. I thought you said he died 6 months ago." Her jaw tightened. I lied. I waited. She took a breath. "Edmund's alive. Or he was 3 weeks ago. He's being held prisoner by Judge Harlan Beach." I knew that name. Everyone in the territories knew that name. Federal judge. Appointed by Washington. Untouchable. Why would a federal judge be holding a deputy marshal prisoner? Because Edmund was going to testify against him. Beach has been using his position to seize land from settlers. Mostly families who don't have lawyers, don't know their rights, can't fight back. Minors, homesteaders, immigrants. He writes orders declaring their claims invalid, has them removed by marshals who work for him, then sells the land through men he controls. Edmund discovered this. Edmund documented it. For 2 years, he kept copies of everything, every fraudulent order, every forged deed, every name of every family Beach destroyed. He was going to testify before a federal grand jury in Denver, and Beach found out. The woman's hand tightened around the badge. 3 weeks ago, Beach's men came to our house. They didn't kill Edmund, they took him. Beach sent me a message. He said, if I want my husband back alive, I bring him the evidence, all of it, before Christmas Day. That's 3 weeks from now. Yes, and you didn't bring him the evidence. She looked at me with eyes that had stopped asking for permission a long time ago. If I give Beach the evidence, Edmund dies anyway. Beach can't afford to let him live, not after what he knows. So I'm doing the only thing that might save him. I'm taking the evidence to the newspapers in Denver. Once it's published, once the whole country knows what Beach has done, he can't make Edmund disappear without everyone knowing why. That's assuming you make it to Denver. That's assuming I make it through tonight. The cabin was quiet except for the sound of wind against the walls and the pop of wood in the stove. I looked at the 2 girls by the fire. Harriet was spreading blankets with careful precision. Clara sat watching the flames, her bandaged arm cradled in her lap. "Who's the marshal leading the men after you?" I asked. The woman's face went hard. "His name is Vance Cutter." Everything stopped. The fire kept burning. The wind kept howling. But inside my chest, something that had been frozen for 12 years cracked straight down the middle. Say that again. Vance Cutter. He's Beach's chief enforcer, the one who does the wet work. Beach can't be connected to. Why? Do you know him? I stood up, walked to the window, pressed my face against the oiled paper, and looked out into the storm. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know him." The woman waited. I turned back to her. "My name is Colton Wade. 12 years ago, I was a bounty hunter working the territories. I brought in a family of German immigrants accused of land fraud. Man named Johann Kruger, his wife, 3 children. I handed them over to the marshal in charge of the case. Let me guess. Vance Cutter. Vance Cutter. He told me the family would get a fair trial. He told me the evidence was solid. I believed him because I was young and stupid, and I wanted the bounty money. What happened to the family?" I was quiet for a long moment. Cutter shot them, all of them. No trial, no judge. He just took them into the woods and executed them. Said they tried to escape. The woman's face didn't change, but I saw something move in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or just the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from learning the world is exactly as cruel as you feared. I found out 2 days later. I continued. By then it was too late. I went to Cutter, demanded to know why. He laughed, told me the whole case was fabricated. Beach wanted the Kruger land. Cutter was just doing his job. And you didn't report it. I tried. Filed a complaint with the territorial marshal's office. It disappeared. Filed another with the federal court. It disappeared. I finally understood. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed for men like Beach. So you ran. I didn't run. I quit. Walked away from bounty hunting. Walked away from the law. Walked away from every town and person that reminded me I'd been complicit in murdering an innocent family. And you came here. I came here. The woman looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "You're not a coward, Mr. Wade." I looked at her. At this woman who'd walked 6 hours through a blizzard, pregnant and bleeding and hunted, who'd lied to protect her husband, who was sitting in my cabin planning to take down a federal judge with nothing but evidence and audacity. "No," I said, "but I used to be." From the fire, Harriet spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Mr. Wade, Clara needs water." I filled a cup from the pot on the stove and brought it to her. Clara took it with both hands, her injured arm moving stiffly. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving my face. When she was finished, I took the cup back. As I did, I saw something around her neck, a small piece of paper folded many times hanging from a string. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. Clara's hand went to it immediately, protective. "It's a letter," Harriet said, "from our father. Clara carries it everywhere." "Does she read it?" "She can't read yet, but I read it to her every night." "What does it say?" Harriet glanced at her mother. The woman nodded once. "It says," Harriet recited from memory, "Clara, you are braver than you know. When you're scared, remember that being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart, and smart girls survive. I love you, Papa." The cabin was very quiet. I looked at Clara. She looked back at me, and for the first time since they'd arrived, I saw something in her face that wasn't just old. It was broken. I stood up, cleared my throat. "You can sleep by the fire tonight," I told the woman. "I'll keep watch." "You don't have to do that." "Yes," I said, "I do, because I'd failed to keep watch 12 years ago. I'd handed a family to a killer because I didn't ask the right questions. I'd been too eager for the money, too trusting of the badge, too certain that the system worked, and a 7-year-old boy died in the snow because of it. I wasn't making that mistake twice." The woman seemed to understand. She nodded once. "My name is Sarah," she said. "Sarah Bennett. Colton Wade. We already know what happens to people who cross beach," she said. "What happens to people who help them cross beach?" I looked at the rifle by the door, then back at her. "Then I guess we'd better make sure he doesn't find out." The night settled in around us. I sat in the chair by the window, rifle across my lap, watching the darkness beyond the glass. Sarah and the girls arranged themselves by the fire. Harriet lay down with Clara tucked against her side, one arm around her little sister, eyes open and watchful, until exhaustion finally dragged them closed. Sarah sat propped against the wall, one hand on her belly, the other resting near the pack that held whatever evidence was worth more than her life. Around midnight she spoke. "You don't have to help us past tonight. Once the storm clears, we can move on. You've already done more than most people would." I didn't answer right away. I watched the snow fall, thick and relentless, burying the world. Finally, I said, "How far along are you?" 8 months, maybe more. It's hard to keep track when you're running. You shouldn't be traveling. Not in your condition, I know. But you're doing it anyway." She looked at her sleeping daughters. "I don't have a choice. If I stay still, they find us. If they find us, Edmund dies. And my girls grow up in a world where monsters like Beach win. Edmund's a lucky man." She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Edmund's a fool. He could have ignored what he saw, kept his head down, collected his pay. We'd be home right now, safe, warm. But he didn't. No," she touched the badge at her throat. "He said some truths are worth dying for. I told him that was easy to say when you're not the one with 3 children to raise. He said that's exactly why it matters. So they grow up knowing their father stood for something." She was quiet for a moment. "I hated him for it," she said, "for choosing principle over safety, for choosing strangers over his family. And now I understand. If Edmund had given up, if he'd let Beach keep destroying families, I could never look at my daughters and tell them to be brave, because they'd know I married a coward, and cowardice is hereditary." I thought about that, about the Kruger boy, about the look in his eyes when Cutter dragged his family into the woods, about how I'd walked away afterward and told myself I'd done nothing wrong because I'd just been following orders. "Your husband's not a fool," I said. "He's just braver than the rest of us." Sarah looked at me across the dim cabin. "Maybe. Or maybe he just loved us enough to want us to inherit a better world than the one he grew up in. That's the same thing, is it? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. The wind picked up outside. The cabin groaned under the weight of it. Snow built up against the door in drifts I could hear shifting and settling. "Mr. Wade," Sarah said. Colton, if something happens to me, if the baby comes early, or if Cutter finds us, or if I don't make it to Denver, there's a letter sewn into the lining of my dress, left side near the hem. It has instructions for where Edmund hid the original documents, in Sheridan. A safe deposit box at the assay office under the name William Carr. Why are you telling me this? Because if I die, someone needs to get that letter to Garrett Foss at the Denver Post. And you're the first person in 6 months who's looked at my daughters like they matter. I looked at Harriet and Clara sleeping by the fire. Clara's small hand was curled around the letter from her father. Harriet's arm was still around her sister even in sleep, protecting her. "They matter," I said. "I know. That's why I need you to promise me. If I don't make it, you get that letter to Denver." I looked at her. At this woman who'd walked through hell pregnant and bleeding because she refused to let evil win. Who'd lied to protect her husband, who was sitting in a stranger's cabin asking him to finish what she started if she couldn't. "I promise," I said. She nodded, closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing evened out. I sat by the window and watched the storm, thinking about promises. About the one I'd broken 12 years ago when I handed the Kruger family to Vance Cutter. About the one I'd just made to a woman I'd known for less than 3 hours. About how strange it was that after 12 years of running from the world had found me anyway. And it had found me in the form of a knock in the storm that I should never have answered. But I had. And now there was no going back. I woke to the sound of Clara screaming, not out loud. She couldn't do that. But the sound of her nightmare was loud enough, thrashing against her sister, small hands clawing at nothing, eyes wide open but seeing something that wasn't in my cabin. Harriet was already awake, holding Clara, whispering words I couldn't hear. Sarah struggled to sit up, hampered by her belly and exhaustion. I crossed the cabin in 3 steps, knelt beside them. "How long has she been like this?" I asked Harriet. "This is the 3rd one tonight. They come every few hours. What does she see?" Harriet looked at me with those serious dark eyes. "She sees Papa. She sees the day the bad men came. Beach's men." Harriet nodded. "They came to our house. Mama told us to hide in the root cellar. We heard shouting, gunshots. Clara wanted to look. I tried to stop her, but she climbed up the stairs and opened the door a crack." What did she see? A man pointing a gun at Papa's head. Papa was on his knees. The man said something, then he hit Papa with the gun. Papa fell down. Clara screamed. The man looked at the cellar door. That's when Mama grabbed us and we ran. I looked at Clara. She'd stopped thrashing, but her eyes were still wide, still seeing something from 6 months ago that wouldn't let her go. I did the only thing I could think of. I started talking. "My father had nightmares too," I said quietly, "when I was about your age. He was a cavalry scout before I was born, fought in the Indian Wars, saw things that stayed with him." Clara's eyes shifted to my face, focused. Every night he'd wake up shouting. My mother would try to calm him, but he wouldn't hear her. He was still back there wherever the nightmare took him. So I started doing something. I'd sit by his bed and tell him about my day, everything that happened, what I had for breakfast, what the weather was like, what I learned in school. Just normal things, boring things. "Did it work?" Harriet asked. "Eventually. It took time, but slowly he started hearing my voice instead of whatever was in his head. The nightmares didn't stop, but they got quieter." I looked at Clara. "You want me to tell you about something boring?" She nodded. I settled back against the wall and started talking about the mountains, about how I'd built this cabin log by log, about the winter I'd miscalculated the snow load on the roof and woke up with 6 inches of powder on my chest because the roof sagged, about the time a black bear tried to come through the window and got stuck halfway. As I talked, I watched Clara's breathing slow. Her eyes lost that wide, haunted look, her hands unclenched. By the time I ran out of stories about incompetent construction and territorial wildlife. She was asleep again. Real sleep this time, not the nightmare kind. Harriet looked at me. "Thank you," she whispered. I stood up. "It's late. You should sleep too. I don't sleep much anymore." "Why not?" "Because if I sleep, who keeps watch?" I meet her eyes. "I keep watch tonight. That's my job." "Your job is to be 9 years old and sleep." "I'm not very good at being 9 years old anymore, I know. But you can practice." She almost smiled. Almost. I went back to my chair by the window. The storm had eased. Not stopped, but lessened. I could see maybe 10 feet past the porch now, instead of 3. The snow was deep, 3 feet at least, more in the drifts. If Cutter and his men were still out there, they weren't moving. Not in this. They'd hunker down, wait for the storm to pass, then come looking, which meant I had until dawn to figure out what to do next. Behind me, I heard Sarah shift, sit up, move carefully toward the stove. "Can't sleep?" I asked without turning around. "The baby's awake. She likes to practice kicking me in the ribs around this time. I don't know for certain, but I have a feeling Edmund know about the baby." There was a long pause. Then Sarah said, "No. I found out the week after they took him. I wanted to tell him. Thought about trying to get a message to wherever Beach is holding him, but I couldn't risk it. If Beach knows I'm pregnant, he might use it as leverage, or he might see it as a liability. One more person to use against you." "Yes." I turned to look at her. She was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of water, staring at nothing. "You ever think about just giving him what he wants?" I asked. "Trading the evidence for Edmund, every single day, but you don't." She looked up at me. "If I give Beach the evidence, Edmund dies. Beach can't let him live, not after what he knows. The only chance Edmund has is if what he knows becomes public knowledge. Once it's in every newspaper from here to Washington Beach, can't make Edmund disappear without everyone knowing why. That's a hell of a gamble. It's the only gamble I have left." She sipped the water, set the cup down. Her hand went to her belly, rubbing slow circles. "I should tell you something," she said, "about Edmund. You don't owe me your story, maybe not, but you should know what kind of man you're helping to save." I waited. "Edmund wasn't always a deputy marshal," she said. "He grew up in a mining camp in Colorado. His father died in a cave when Edmund was 12. His mother took in laundry to keep them fed. Edmund worked the mines as soon as he was old enough to hold a pick. When he was 17, there was a dispute over wages. The mine owner cut everyone's pay by half. Said the silver vein was running thin, and they had to make sacrifices. The miners found out later the owner had just bought a house in Denver. 3 stories, indoor plumbing. The miners went on strike. The owner brought in Pinkertons to break it up. Edmund was there when they opened fire on the picket line. Killed 6 men. 3 of them were boys Edmund had grown up with." Sarah's voice was steady, but I could hear the weight in it. "Edmund could have gone the other way after that," she continued. "Could have turned bitter, angry, spent his life hating the system and everyone in it. Instead, he joined the marshal service. Said if the law was broken, the answer wasn't to burn it down. The answer was to become the law and fix it from the inside. Idealistic, impossibly so. I told him that when we met. I was running a boarding house in Cheyenne. He came in looking for a room, started courting me over dinner conversations about justice and corruption, and whether one man could make a difference. I thought he was naive. And now I think he was right. And I think that's why Beach has to kill him. Because men like Edmund are dangerous. Not because they're violent. Because they believe the system can be better than it is. And they make other people believe it too." She looked at me. "Vance Cutter killed the Kruger family because they resisted. Edmund documented Beach's crimes because he believed the truth mattered. They're the same kind of man, the kind who won't bend. The kind who'd rather die than live as a coward. And you married one, I married one. And I love him for it, and I hate him for it. And I'm going to save him because if I don't, I'll have to explain to my daughters why I let a good man die to keep them safe. And I don't think I could live with the look in their eyes when they understand what that choice means." I thought about the Kruger boy again, about how I'd made the opposite choice. Safety over truth, survival over justice. "You're braver than I am," I said. "No, I'm just more desperate." The cabin fell quiet again. Outside, the wind was dying. The storm was ending, which meant dawn was coming. And with dawn, Cutter. Sarah spoke again. "You said you knew Cutter. How well?" "Well enough to know he doesn't give up. And well enough to know he's probably sitting in some shelter right now, waiting for the storm to clear, cleaning his guns and thinking about all the ways he's going to make me pay for the complaint I filed against him 12 years ago. He knows you're here. He will. Once he tracks you to this area and doesn't find a body, he'll start checking every structure within 10 miles. And this is the only cabin in this valley. Then we should leave. As soon as the storm clears. You're 8 months pregnant, and Clara has a fresh bullet wound. You're not outrunning anyone. Then what do we do?" I looked at the rifle by the door, then at the 2 sleeping girls by the fire, then back at Sarah. "We make sure he doesn't find us." Sarah studied my face. "You have a plan. I have something that might work. There's a box canyon about 2 miles northeast of here, narrow entrance, easy to defend. There's a cave system in the back that goes deep enough to hide in if we need to. If we move before dawn, we can get you there, and I can lead Cutter away. And then what? Then I deal with Cutter. Deal with him how? The way I should have dealt with him 12 years ago." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Cutter won't be alone. Beach will have sent at least 3 men. Maybe more, I know. So you're planning to face down multiple armed men by yourself. In the middle of winter, in mountains, you know, and they don't. That about covers it. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the first smart thing I've done in 12 years. She shook her head. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Why? You don't owe us anything. You don't know Edmund. You barely know me. Why would you risk your life for strangers?" I stood up, walked to the fire, looked down at Clara and Harriet sleeping. Clara's hand was still curled around that letter from her father. Harriet's arm was still around her sister. 12 years ago, I handed a family to Vance Cutter because I trusted the system to do the right thing. The father's name was Johann Kruger. He had 3 kids. The youngest was a boy named Peter, 7 years old. I stopped, swallowed. I didn't know Cutter was going to kill them. I thought there'd be a trial, due process. All the things you're supposed to get when you live in a country with laws. Instead, Cutter took them into the woods and shot them. All 5, left them in a ditch. I found out 2 days later. I rode out to the site. The bodies were still there. Cutter hadn't even bothered to bury them. Animals had gotten to them. Peter's eyes were still open. Sarah didn't say anything. "I buried them myself," I continued. "Dug the graves alone. Took me 2 days. I was still digging when a territorial marshal rode up and told me I was interfering with official business. I told him to go to hell. He told me if I filed a complaint, I'd end up in a ditch too. So I didn't file a complaint. I took my bounty money and I walked away. And I've been walking away ever since." I looked at Sarah. "I can't walk away this time. Because if I do, Clara's going to end up like Peter, and Harriet's going to end up in a ditch. And you're going to end up shot in some nameless ravine while Cutter burns your evidence and tells Beach the problem's solved." I took a breath. "I've spent 12 years hating myself for what I didn't do. I'm not adding your daughters to that list." Sarah's eyes were bright. She stood up slowly, crossed to where I was standing, put one hand on my arm. "Edmund was right," she said quietly. "There are still good men in this world. I'm not good. I'm just tired of being a coward. That's the same thing. No, good men act because it's right. Cowards act because they can't live with themselves if they don't. There's a difference, is there?" I didn't answer. From the fire, Harriet spoke. She was awake, had been listening. "When do we leave?" Sarah turned. "Harriet, you should be sleeping. I heard everything." Harriet sat up, careful not to wake Clara. "You're planning to hide us and fight the bad men alone. That's right?" "I can help." I looked at this 9-year-old girl with her serious face and old eyes. "No," I said. "I can shoot. Papa taught me. I'm good, I believe you. But you're not shooting at anyone. You're going to stay with your mother and sister and keep them safe. That's your job." Harriet's jaw set, the same stubborn line her mother had. "I can do both." "No, you can't. Because if something happens to your mother, you're the only one who can take care of Clara. And that's more important than any fight." She stared at me for a long time. Then finally she nodded. The sky outside the window was starting to turn gray. Not dawn yet, but close. "We need to move," I said. I started gathering supplies, extra ammunition, dried meat, a canteen, my heavy coat. Sarah and Harriet got Clara up gently. The little girl woke, confused, saw the activity, understood without words that something was happening. While they prepared, I went to the back of the cabin, lifted a loose floorboard. Underneath was a metal box. I opened it. Inside was everything I'd kept from my old life. My bounty hunter's license long expired. A bundle of wanted posters with my notes on them. A deputy's badge I'd never turned in after a temporary appointment in Nevada. And at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, a leather journal. I pulled it out, opened it. The first page had one line in my father's handwriting. "The mountains remember everything we try to forget." I flipped through the pages, all the jobs I'd worked, all the men I'd tracked, all the people I'd brought in, dead or alive. And on the last page, in my own handwriting, dated December 14th, 1875. Johann Kruger, Anna Kruger. Wilhelm, age 14. Greta, age 11. Peter, age 7. I have failed them. I closed the journal, put it back in the box, but I took the deputy's badge, slipped it into my pocket. Maybe I'd need it. Maybe I just wanted to remember what I used to believe in. When I came back, Sarah had the girls ready. Clara's arm was wrapped tight. Harriet had both packs on her shoulders, despite Sarah's protests. Sarah herself looked pale, but determined. "Ready?" I asked. Sarah looked around the cabin one last time. "This place saved our lives. It's just wood and nails." "No, it's more than that. It's proof that a man can choose to step back into the world after walking away from it." She met my eyes. "Thank you." "Colton." I opened the door. The storm had passed. The world outside was buried in white, clean, silent, beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful, deadly and pure. I led them out into the snow. We moved northeast, following a game trail I knew by heart. The snow was deep, but packed enough to walk on. Sarah struggled. Her breathing was labored. Twice she had to stop, but she didn't complain, just waved me on when she caught her breath. Harriet stayed behind her, ready to catch her if she fell. Clara walked beside me, silent, watchful, her eyes scanning the trees like she expected danger from every shadow. Smart girl. We reached the box canyon as the sun broke over the eastern peaks. The entrance was a narrow slot between two rock faces, barely wide enough for a horse. I led them through. Inside, the canyon opened up, maybe 100 yards across, sheer walls on three sides, a frozen creek running down the middle, and in the back wall, partially hidden by dead brush, the cave entrance. I'd found it my second winter in these mountains, used it once to wait out a blizzard that lasted 5 days. It was big enough for 4 people, dry, protected, safe. "This is it," I said. Sarah looked around. "If they find the entrance, they won't, not unless I lead them here, and I won't." "How long do we wait? Until I come back, or until 3 days pass, whichever comes first. And if you don't come back." Sarah's voice was steady, but I heard the fear underneath. I pulled out the deputy's badge, pressed it into her hand. "If I don't come back in 3 days, you take this. You go to Redemption Falls. It's a town about 30 miles south of here. Show them this badge. Tell them Colton Wade sent you. Ask for Sheriff Hayes. He's an old friend. Tell him everything. He'll get you to Denver. What if he doesn't believe me? He will. Hayes owes me a favor, a big one." I helped them into the cave. Got a small fire started in the back where the smoke would dissipate through cracks in the rock. Left them most of my food supplies. When I was done, I knelt in front of Clara. She looked at me with those old eyes. I'm going to make sure the bad men don't find you, I said. Okay, she nodded. And when this is over, I'm going to teach you how to read, so you can read your papa's letter yourself. Would you like that? Another nod, and this time something that might have been the ghost of a smile. I stood, looked at Harriet. Take care of them. I will. I turned to Sarah. Her hand went to her belly. The other hand clutched the deputy's badge. Edmund would like you, she said. I doubt that. I don't like myself most days. Then you have something in common. She tried to smile. Be careful, Colton. Careful doesn't win fights. Mean does. I stepped out of the cave, turned back one more time, saw Sarah and her daughters framed in the entrance. A pregnant woman. A 9-year-old girl trying to be a soldier. A 6-year-old who'd forgotten how to speak. 3 people who shouldn't be in this canyon, who should be home, safe. Living lives where federal judges don't kill deputies and children don't have nightmares about men with guns. But this was the world we had, not the one we wanted. I'm coming back, I said. I know, Sarah replied. I didn't know if she believed it, but it didn't matter. I turned and walked back through the slot canyon, out into the snow. Vance Cutter was out there somewhere, with at least 2 other men, looking for Sarah Bennett and the evidence that would destroy Judge Harlan Beach. And all that stood between them and 3 people who couldn't defend themselves was one man who'd spent 12 years running from a fight. I checked my rifle, made sure the revolver at my hip was loaded. Then I started walking back toward my cabin, not to hide, to hunt. The sun was climbing over the eastern peaks when I saw the smoke, thin, gray, rising from exactly where my cabin should be. They'd found it. I was half a mile out, moving through timber so thick the snow hadn't penetrated to ground level in places. Good cover, bad sight lines. I dropped to one knee behind a downed pine and pulled out the small brass telescope I'd carried since my bounty hunting days. 3 horses tied to the porch rail, all of them cavalry stock, big animals bred for endurance, the kind the Army sold off to territorial marshals when they got too old for Indian campaigns, but still had years of hard use left in them. 2 men visible, one standing on the porch rifle in hand scanning the tree line, the other walking the perimeter, reading tracks in the snow, looking for signs of which direction we'd gone. I watched the one on the porch, tall, lean, moving with the kind of casual confidence that comes from years of being the most dangerous thing in any room. Even at this distance, even through the scope, I recognized him. Vance Cutter, 12 years older, harder around the edges, but the same man who'd laughed when I confronted him about the Kruger family. The same man who'd told me the system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as designed. The same man who'd executed 5 people in the woods and slept fine that night. My hand tightened on the rifle. The second man finished his circuit and climbed the porch steps. They talked. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read body language. The tracker was pointing northeast, toward the Box Canyon. He'd found our trail. Cutter nodded, gestured toward the cabin. The tracker went inside. That left 1 man unaccounted for, 3 horses, 2 visible men. I swept the telescope slowly across the clearing. Nothing. Checked the tree line on the far side. Nothing. Then I saw movement in the window, a shape passing behind the oiled paper. The tracker was searching inside, looking for anything that might tell him who I was, what Sarah had told me, where we'd gone. He wouldn't find much. I didn't keep personal effects, no letters, no photographs, just books and tools and 12 years of deliberate anonymity. But he'd find the medical supplies I'd used on Clara, the blood-stained bandages, the needle and thread. And he'd know that whoever owned this cabin had helped them, which made me a target. I was fine with that. I waited. Patience was the first thing you learned as a bounty hunter. The second thing was that men who thought they were in control always got careless. 10 minutes passed. The tracker came back out, shook his head, said something to Cutter. Cutter's face darkened. He pointed at the tree line again. Northeast. They were going to follow our trail to the Box Canyon. I needed to stop that. I shifted position slightly, lined up the shot. The tracker was closer, easier target, but Cutter was the leader. Take him out, and the others might lose their nerve. Might. My finger rested on the trigger. 300 yards, slight uphill angle. Wind was negligible in the trees. I'd made harder shots, but the moment I pulled that trigger, I'd announced my position, and I still didn't know where the third man was. Shooting blind was how you ended up dead. I lowered the rifle. There was another way. I backed away from the downed pine, staying low, using the heavy timber for cover. Circled south, moving parallel to the clearing. If the third man was setting up an ambush position, he'd be somewhere with good sight lines to the cabin and the approaches. Somewhere like the rock outcrop a quarter-mile south. I moved carefully. No sudden movements. Nothing that would catch the eye of a man watching for threats. It took me 20 minutes to cover 300 yards. But when I reached the base of the outcrop and started climbing, I knew I'd guessed right. Boot prints in the snow. Recent. Leading up to a natural shelf about 15 feet up, I climbed without making a sound. The trick was weight distribution. Keep 3 points of contact, move when the wind gusted so any noise got buried. I reached the shelf and peered over the edge. The third man was there, prone position behind a fallen boulder, rifle pointed at the cabin. He was young, maybe 25, nervous energy in the way he kept shifting his weight, scanning. Waiting for a target that hadn't appeared yet. He didn't know I was behind him. I pulled my knife, the one I'd carried for 20 years, balanced, sharp enough to shave with. I'd used it to skin deer and cut rope, and once in Nevada to settle an argument with a claim jumper who'd pulled iron on me in a saloon. I'd never killed a man with it. There was a first time for everything. I moved fast, closed the distance in 2 steps, got my hand over his mouth before he could shout. The knife went in clean between the ribs, angled up. Found the heart. He thrashed once, went still. I lowered him to the ground slowly, checked his pockets, found nothing useful. No papers, no identification, just ammunition and a small flask of whiskey. A professional, or as professional as you could be working for a man like Beach. I took his rifle, a good Winchester, well maintained. I checked the load, full magazine. The kid had been ready for a fight. He just hadn't been ready for the fight to come from behind. I moved back to the edge of the shelf, looked down at the cabin. Cutter and the tracker were mounting up, getting ready to follow our trail. I raised the Winchester, sighted on the tracker, squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the clearing. The tracker jerked, tumbled backward off his horse, hit the snow, and didn't move. Cutter's head snapped around, looking for the source. I'd already shifted position, moving along the shelf, getting a different angle. Cutter swung off his horse, used the animal for cover, pulled his own rifle, started scanning the tree line, looking in the wrong direction. I fired again. The round punched through the horse's neck. The animal screamed, went down thrashing. Cutter rolled clear, came up running, heading for the cabin. Smart, get to cover, assess, regroup. I let him go, watched him crash through the door, saw the barrel of his rifle appear in the window. Now we were even, both of us in cover, both of us armed, both of us knowing the other was out there. The difference was I knew this terrain, and he didn't. I climbed down from the outcrop, moved through the timber, circling, getting closer. Cutter would be doing math right now. 3 men, 2 dead, 1 unaccounted for. He'd assumed the third man was still in position somewhere, watching, waiting. He'd be wrong. I reached the edge of the clearing, 50 yards from the cabin, close enough to hear if Cutter moved, far enough that he couldn't see me through the window. I settled in behind a thick pine, waited. The sun climbed higher. The temperature dropped. That's how it worked in the mountains. Bright sun, bitter cold. The kind of cold that got into your bones if you stayed still too long. I stayed still anyway. An hour passed, then another. Cutter was patient. I'd give him that. But I was more patient, and I had time. He didn't. Because every hour he spent pinned in my cabin was an hour Sarah and the girls were getting farther away in his mind. Every hour was an hour closer to the deadline Beach had given Sarah. Eventually, Cutter would have to move. The sun was past its zenith when he did. The cabin door opened, slowly. Cutter appeared in the doorway, rifle up, scanning. He'd made a white flag from something inside. One of my shirts, maybe. He was waving it. I didn't shoot. He called out. His voice carried across the clearing. "Whoever you are, I'm not here for you. I'm here for the woman and the children. You give them to me, you walk away. This doesn't have to be your fight." I stayed silent. Cutter tried again. "I know you helped them, found the bandages, the blood. You're a decent man, that's commendable. But those people are fugitives. They're wanted for theft of federal property. I'm a United States marshal. I have a legal warrant for their arrest." He paused, waited for a response. I gave him one. I called out from my position in the trees. "You're lying, Cutter." The silence that followed was worth the risk of giving away my position. Then Cutter's voice came back. Different now, recognition in it. "Wade? Colton Wade. That's right, I'll be damned. Thought you were dead, just resting. 12 years is a long rest." I had a lot to think about. Like what? Like how many people you've killed for Beach. Like whether the Kruger family was the first or just the most memorable. Another silence, longer this time. When Cutter spoke again, the false civility was gone. "They told me you filed a complaint, said you went to the territorial marshal, the federal court. Nobody listened. I noticed. You know why nobody listened, Wade? Because nobody cared. Kruger was nobody. A German immigrant with fake papers and a claim he couldn't defend. The system worked exactly the way it was supposed to. By murdering a family, by removing an obstacle, there's a difference. No, there isn't." Cutter laughed. It was a cold sound. "You always were soft, Wade. Too much conscience, not enough spine. That's why you quit. That's why you've been hiding in this mountain for 12 years like a coward." "Maybe, but I'm not hiding anymore." I shifted position, moved 20 yards to the left, staying in the trees. Cutter kept talking. "You think you're doing the right thing, protecting that woman and her brats. But you don't know the whole story. I know enough. You know what she told you. You don't know what her husband did. Edmund Bennett wasn't some crusading lawman. He was a thief. Stole federal documents, forged evidence. He's a criminal, Wade, and his wife is helping him. That's Beach's story. That's the truth." Then why isn't Bennett in a courtroom? Why is he locked up somewhere while Beach uses his family as bait? Because Beach is offering him a deal. Turn over the stolen documents. Bennett goes free. It's mercy, Wade. More than he deserves. I'd heard enough. I'm going to give you a choice, Cutter. Same choice you gave Johann Kruger. You can walk away. Right now. Get on one of those horses and ride back to Beach. Tell him you lost the trail. Tell him whatever you want. But you leave those women and children alone. And if I don't, then you can try to find me in these woods. And we'll see how that goes." Cutter was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're bluffing. You don't have the stomach for this. You never did. You keep telling yourself that." I started moving, circling again, getting a different angle on the cabin. Cutter called out, "Last chance, Wade. Tell me where they are. I'll let you walk away. You have my word. Your word isn't worth the air it takes to speak it. Fine." Then we do this the hard way. The window shattered. Cutter fired 3 quick shots into the trees. Nowhere near me. He was shooting blind, trying to provoke a response, get me to reveal my position. I stayed quiet, kept moving. More shots. Cutter was getting frustrated, wasting ammunition. Good. I reached a position due north of the cabin, the back wall. No windows on this side, just solid logs. I waited for Cutter to reload. When the shooting stopped, I moved, crossed the open ground in a dead run. 20 yards, 15, 10. I hit the back wall and pressed myself against it, breathing hard, listening. Inside I heard Cutter moving, crossing to the window. Looking out, trying to spot me, I pulled a match from my pocket, struck it against the wall, held it to a piece of dried moss I'd grabbed from a tree. The moss caught, small flame, barely visible in the daylight. I held it up to the gap between 2 logs. the gap I'd never bothered to properly seal because I was the only one who lived here, and a little draft never hurt anyone. The flame went through, into the cabin. I heard Cutter curse, smelled smoke. The inside of the cabin was dry wood. Books, blankets, 12 years of accumulated tinder. It would burn fast. I moved away from the wall, back to the tree line, found cover, watched. Smoke started pouring from the gaps in the logs, then from the window, then from under the door. The door crashed open. Cutter came out, coughing, eyes watering, rifle in one hand. He made it 3 steps before I shot him. The round took him in the leg, shin, shattered bone. He went down hard. The rifle flew from his grip, landed in the snow 10 feet away. I walked out of the trees, rifle raised, approached slowly. Cutter was on his back, clutching his leg, blood pooling in the snow. He saw me coming, reached for his sidearm. I put a boot on his wrist, ground down. He screamed. I kicked the revolver away, knelt beside him. Behind us, the cabin was fully engulfed, flames reaching for the sky, black smoke billowing, everything I'd built over 12 years burning to the ground. I didn't look back. Cutter's face was twisted with pain and rage. "You're dead, Wade. Beach will hunt you to the ends of the earth for this. Beach can try. You don't know what you're dealing with. Beach owns everyone. Marshals, judges, senators. You can't fight the system." I looked at this man who'd killed a 7-year-old boy and slept fine, who'd spent 12 years doing Beach's dirty work, who'd chased a pregnant woman and 2 children through a blizzard. "I'm not fighting the system," I said. "I'm fighting you." I stood up, pointed the rifle at his chest. Cutter's eyes went wide. "Wait. Wade, wait. I can tell you where Bennett is. Beach is holding him at the federal lockup in Cheyenne. 3rd floor, cell 12. You want to save him? I can help you." "Why would you do that?" "Because I want to live." I thought about that. Thought about pulling the trigger, ending this, making sure Cutter never hurt anyone else. Thought about the Kruger boy, about Peter's open eyes. But I also thought about Sarah, about what she'd said. That Edmund believed the system could be better than it was, and maybe it could, if I didn't become the same kind of monster I was fighting. I lowered the rifle. "You're going to Redemption Falls," I said. "You're going to turn yourself in to Sheriff Hayes. You're going to confess to the Kruger murders, and you're going to testify against Beach." Cutter laughed. It sounded like broken glass. "Even if I wanted to, Beach would have me killed before I opened my mouth. Then I guess you better talk fast." I pulled him upright. He screamed again. The leg was bad. Bone fragments grinding. He wouldn't be riding anywhere. I tied his hands with his own belt, fashioned a rough splint for his leg using branches and strips from his coat. Then I hauled him to his feet. "Walk," I said. "I can't." "Then crawl. But you're moving." It took us 3 hours to cover the mile to where I'd left the horses. Cutter collapsed twice. I dragged him up both times, no mercy, no rest. By the time we reached the animals, he was sobbing, begging, promising me anything if I'd just let him die. I threw him over one of the horses, tied him down, climbed onto the other. The cabin was still burning in the distance, smoke rising like a funeral pyre. Everything I'd built, everything I'd hidden behind for 12 years, gone. And I felt nothing but relief. The box canyon was empty when I got back. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought they'd been found, taken, killed. Then I saw the marks in the snow, small boot prints, leading deeper into the cave system. I dismounted, left Cutter tied to the horse. The man was unconscious now, shock and blood loss. He'd live, probably. I didn't particularly care either way. I followed the prints into the cave, called out softly, "Sarah, it's Colton." Silence. Then Harriet's voice from the darkness. "How do we know it's really you, smart girl?" "Because I know Clara carries a letter from her father on a string around her neck. And I know you can shoot, but your mother won't let you. And I know your mother's name is Sarah Bennett, and she's 8 months pregnant with a baby she thinks is a girl." More silence. Then movement. A small flame appeared. Sarah holding a candle stub, Harriet and Clara behind her. Sarah's face flooded with relief. "You came back. I said I would. I know. But people say a lot of things they don't mean. I mean what I say." She studied my face. "Saw something there. What happened?" "I killed 2 of them. The third is tied to a horse outside. He's hurt bad. We need to move quickly. Where are we going?" "Redemption Falls. It's the closest town with a telegraph office. And a doctor. And a sheriff, I trust. And then we get you to Denver." Sarah's hand went to her belly. "How far is Redemption Falls?" 30 miles. 2 days on foot. Less if we can get the horses moving. I'm not sure I can walk 30 miles. You won't have to. You'll ride. Harriet and Clara can take turns on the other horse. And you. I'll walk. I've done it before." We gathered what little they'd brought. The pack with Sarah's spare clothes, the leather satchel with the evidence, Clara's small blanket. As we worked, Harriet pulled me aside. Her voice was low. "Mr. Wade, you're bleeding." I looked down. She was right. Blood seeping through my shirt. Left side. I hadn't even noticed. "It's nothing. Let me see. Harriet, let me see." I lifted the shirt, a graze across my ribs. One of Cutter's blind shots through the window had found me after all. Not deep, but not nothing either. Harriet pulled out bandages from her pack, started wrapping the wound with practiced efficiency. "I can stitch it if you need." "You know how to stitch. Papa taught me. He said every marshal's daughter should know basic field medicine. Your father was a smart man. He is a smart man." She looked up at me. "He's not dead. You believe that, right? That he is still alive." "I believe your mother wouldn't be doing any of this if she thought he was gone. That's not the same thing." "No, but it's all I've got." She finished the bandage, tied it tight. "When we get to Redemption Falls, when we send the telegram to Denver, will that be enough to save Papa? I don't know, but it's the best chance he has." Harriet nodded, picked up her pack. "Okay then, let's go." We emerged from the cave. Cutter was awake now, staring at us with eyes full of hate and pain. Sarah saw him and stopped. Her whole body went rigid. "That's one of them," she whispered. "That's Vance Cutter." She walked toward him slowly. Cutter watched her approach. Something flickered in his expression. Fear, maybe, or recognition. Sarah stopped a few feet from the horse, looked up at him. "You came to my house," she said, 6 months ago. "You were the one who hit Edmund, the one who dragged him away, while my daughters screamed." Cutter said nothing. Cutter. Sarah's hand tightened on the badge Colton had given her. "I want you to know something. Everything you did, everyone you hurt, it was for nothing. Because I'm going to make sure the whole country knows what you are, what Beach is. And when they put you both in prison, I'm going to bring my daughters to watch." She turned away. We started walking. The journey to Redemption Falls took 3 days. We should have made it in 2, but Sarah's condition worsened. The baby had dropped. Contractions were coming irregularly, not labor yet, but close. We had to stop every few hours, let her rest, wait for the pain to pass. Harriet never complained, never asked when we'd get there, just walked beside her mother, ready to catch her when she stumbled, ready to encourage her when she wanted to quit. Clara walked beside me, still silent, but she'd started doing something new. Every time we stopped, she'd find a stick and draw pictures in the snow. A house, a man, a woman, 3 children, a family. On the second night, we made camp in a hollow protected from the wind. I got a fire going, rationed out the last of the dried meat. Sarah was having a bad spell, contractions coming every 20 minutes. Too early, too fast. I boiled water, prepared the medical supplies just in case. Harriet sat beside her mother, holding her hand, talking quietly. Clara sat beside me, staring into the fire. I pulled out one of the books I'd grabbed from the cabin before it burned. A collection of folk tales, simple language, big print. "Want me to read to you?" I asked Clara. She looked at the book, then at me, nodded. I opened to the first story, started reading aloud. It was about a girl who got lost in the woods. She was scared and alone. But she found a trail of stones that led her home. And when she got there, her family was waiting. As I read, I saw Clara's lips moving, forming the words silently. She was reading along, When I finished the story, I looked at her. "You can read." She nodded. "How long?" She held up 4 fingers. 4 months. Another nod. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Clara pulled out the letter from her father, unfolded it carefully, pointed to a line near the bottom. I read it aloud. "When you're ready to speak again, the first words should be ones that matter." I looked at Clara. "You're waiting for the right moment." She nodded. "You'll know when it comes." Another nod. And this time, the ghost of a smile. The 3rd day, we crested a ridge and saw Redemption Falls spread out in the valley below. It wasn't much, maybe 50 buildings, a main street, a church, a saloon, but after 3 days in the wilderness, it looked like paradise. Sarah saw it and started crying. Not from pain, from relief. "We made it," she whispered. "We actually made it. Not yet, but close." We descended into the valley. The sun was setting, painting the snow pink and gold. As we entered the main street, people stopped and stared. A pregnant woman, 2 children, a man leading a horse with a wounded prisoner tied across it. We were quite a sight. I headed straight for the sheriff's office, tied the horses outside, helped Sarah down. The door opened before I could knock. Sheriff Thaddeus Hayes stood in the doorway, 60 years old, white beard, eyes that had seen every kind of human wickedness and decided the job was worth doing anyway. He looked at me, looked at Sarah and the girls, looked at Cutter. Then he said, "Colton Wade, I'll be damned." "Hello, Thad. You look like hell. Feel worse. This your family?" "No, but I'm responsible for them." Hayes nodded, stepped aside. "Come on in." The interior of the sheriff's office was warm. A stove, a desk, 2 cells in the back. Basic, functional. Hayes gestured to a chair. Sarah sank into it gratefully. Harriet and Clara stood close to their mother, watching Hayes, measuring him the way they measured every stranger. Hayes pulled out a bottle of whiskey, poured 2 glasses, handed me one. "You going to tell me what's going on?" he asked. I gave him the short version. Edmund Bennett, Judge Beach, the evidence. Vance Cutter. Hayes listened without interrupting. When I finished, he looked at Cutter through the window. "That really him? It's him. Beach's enforcer, the same." Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what you're asking me to do. If I arrest Cutter, if I send that telegram to Denver, Beach will come after this town, after me, after everyone who helped you. I know. And you're asking anyway. I'm not asking. I'm telling you there's a woman and 2 children who deserve justice, and a man locked up in Cheyenne who risked everything to do the right thing. This is your chance to do the same." Hayes looked at Sarah, at Harriet, at Clara. Then he looked at me. "You always were the stubbornest son of a bitch I ever met. Is that a yes?" Hayes stood, walked to the door, called for his deputy. A young man appeared, maybe 25, eager. "Get Dr. Morrison," Hayes said. "We've got a pregnant woman who needs looking at. And tell the telegraph operator I need to send an urgent message to Denver." The deputy nodded, took off running. Hayes turned back to me. "I'll need statements from all of you, and I'll need that evidence Sarah's carrying. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." Sarah opened the leather satchel, pulled out the documents Edmund had compiled. Ledgers, affidavits, correspondence. 2 years of meticulous documentation. Hayes flipped through them. His face darkened with every page. "This is enough," he said quietly. "This is more than enough. How long until Beach knows? Telegraph to Denver will go out tonight. Story will be in the morning papers. By noon tomorrow, every newspaper from here to Washington will have picked it up." Hayes looked at me. "Beach will know by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. And Edmund." Hayes pulled out a piece of paper, started writing. "I'm sending a second telegram to the federal marshal in Cheyenne, friend of mine. Owes me a favor. I'll ask him to check on Edmund Bennett. Make sure he's still alive. Make sure Beach doesn't try to disappear him once this breaks. Will he do it?" Hayes signed the telegram, sealed it. "If he wants to keep owing me favors, he will." The doctor arrived, a middle-aged woman with capable hands and no-nonsense eyes. She took one look at Sarah and said, "When was your last contraction?" 20 minutes ago. "How long have they been coming?" 3 days. The doctor's eyebrows went up. And you've been walking. We didn't have a choice. Well, you have one now. Come with me. Let's make sure that baby stays put for at least another week. Sarah looked at me. Go, I said. I'll watch the girls. Harriet spoke up. I'm going with Mama. The doctor nodded. Of course you are. They left. Clara stayed with me. Hayes poured another glass of whiskey, pushed it toward me. You look like you need it. I need a lot of things. This is just the most immediate. Hayes sat down, studied my face. 12 years, Colton. 12 years you've been up in that mountain. Why come down now? Because I got tired of hiding from the mistake I made. The Kruger family. You knew about that. I'm a sheriff. It's my job to know things. He sipped his whiskey. You think saving this woman and her kids makes up for it? No, nothing makes up for it. But it's a start. Hayes nodded. That's all any of us can do. Start. We sat in silence for a while. Clara climbed into the chair next to me, leaned her head against my arm. Hayes saw it, smiled slightly. She likes you. She's got poor judgment. Or maybe she's a better judge of character than you are. The telegraph operator came back an hour later. Both messages sent. Denver and Cheyenne. Hayes paid him, sent him home. Then we waited. The doctor returned with Sarah and Harriet. Sarah looked better. Some color back in her face. Baby's fine, the doctor said. Mother's exhausted, but stable. I want her on bed rest for at least 2 days. After that, we'll see. Can she travel to Denver, I asked. Not for at least a week. Maybe 2. We don't have 2 weeks. The doctor looked at me with eyes that had seen too many people push themselves past their limits. Then she'll give birth on the side of the road, and likely die doing it. Is that what you want? No. Then she rests. Here, where I can keep an eye on her. I looked at Sarah. She was already shaking her head. Colton, no. We have to get to Denver. We have to make sure Garrett Foss gets the full story, that he understands what Beach did. The telegraph is enough. Hayes will make sure the story gets out. But Edmund, Hayes already sent word to Cheyenne. They'll protect him. You don't know that. No, but I know if you collapse from exhaustion or give birth in a snowstorm, none of this matters. Edmund needs you alive, Sarah, not martyred. She looked at her daughters. Harriet met her eyes, nodded. Mama, we're safe here. For the first time in months, we're safe. Sarah's resistance crumbled. She started crying, full sobs. All the fear and exhaustion and desperation of the past 6 months pouring out. Harriet wrapped her arms around her mother, held her. Clara climbed down from her chair, crossed to them, put her small hand on Sarah's knee. And then she spoke. Her voice was rough from disuse, barely more than a whisper. But it was real. It was there. She said, "Don't cry, Mama, mister. Wade won't let the bad men get us." The room went silent. Sarah's eyes went wide. Clara, you're talking. Clara nodded. The first words should be ones that matter. I think these matter. Sarah pulled her youngest daughter into her arms, held her so tight I thought she'd break her. Harriet joined them, the 3 of them holding each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Hayes looked at me. His eyes were suspiciously bright. You did good, Colton. I just got them here. They did the rest. That night, Hayes set up cots in the back room of his office. Sarah and the girls slept there, safe, warm, protected. I took first watch, sat in the sheriff's chair, rifle across my lap, watching the street. Cutter was in one of the cells, legs splinted properly now. Doctor had given him something for the pain. He'd live to stand trial. Around midnight, Hayes relieved me. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to be busy. I lay down on the floor near the stove, closed my eyes. For the first time in 12 years, I slept without nightmares, because for the first time in 12 years, I'd done something worth the air I breathed. The next morning, the reply telegrams started coming in, first from Cheyenne. Edmund Bennett confirmed alive. In protective custody. Federal marshal requesting immediate transfer to Denver pending Beach investigation. Sarah cried when she heard that. Edmund was alive, and he was going to stay that way. Second telegram from Denver. Garrett Foss at the Denver Post. Message received. Stop. Story running tomorrow morning edition. Stop. Request full interview with Sarah Bennett at earliest convenience. Stop. Third telegram came an hour later from the Territorial Governor's office in Cheyenne. Judge Harlan Beach suspended pending federal investigation. Stop. Warrant issued for arrest. Stop. U.S. Marshals en route to take custody. Stop. Hayes read that one aloud. Then he looked at me. You did it, he said. You brought down a federal judge. Sarah did it. I just kept her alive long enough. From the cot, Sarah said, we did it together. Harriet was at the window, watching the street. Mr. Wade, there are men coming. I was on my feet instantly, rifle in hand. How many? 4, on horses. They're wearing badges. Hayes joined Harriet at the window, looked out, relaxed. Those are federal marshals, from Denver. They're here for Cutter. Are you sure? I know the lead marshal, name's Garrett Cross, good man. We watched the marshals ride up, dismount. Hayes went out to meet them. I stayed inside, keeping watch over Sarah and the girls. Through the window I saw Hayes and Marshal Cross talking, saw Cross gesture toward the office. Hayes nodded. They came inside. Cross was in his 50s, gray hair, hard eyes, the kind of lawman who'd seen it all and still believed in the job. He looked at Sarah. Mrs. Bennett. She nodded. Your husband is being transferred to Denver as we speak. He'll be there when you arrive, under full protection. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. Thank you. Cross turned to me. And you're Colton Wade. I am. You used to work bounty contracts in the territories. Long time ago. You're the one who brought in Vance Cutter. I am. Cross extended his hand. On behalf of the United States Marshal Service, thank you. Cutter's been on our watch list for years, but we could never build a case until now. I shook his hand. Don't thank me yet. Make sure Beach goes to prison, then we'll talk. Cross smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just been given permission to hunt. Judge Beach is going to prison, he said. I'll make sure of it personally. They took Cutter away an hour later, loaded him into a wagon, chained, under guard. As they rode out, Cutter looked at me through the bars. This isn't over, Wade. I think it is. Beach has friends in high places. He'll walk. Maybe, but you won't. The wagon disappeared down the main street. Sarah stood beside me, watching it go. It's really over, she said. Not yet, but soon. She turned to face me. What will you do now? Go back to your mountain. I thought about that, about the cabin that had burned, about 12 years of deliberate isolation, about a 9-year-old girl who'd learned to be a soldier, about a 6-year-old who'd learned to speak again, about a woman who'd walked through hell for her family. I don't think so, I said. I think the mountain and I are done with each other. Then what? I looked at Hayes. He was standing in the doorway of his office, watching the street. That I called out, You still looking for a deputy? Hayes turned, looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Position's yours if you want it. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I said, I want it. Sarah's face broke into a real smile, the first one I'd seen from her. It changed everything. Made her look younger, lighter. Edmund will want to thank you, she said, when we get to Denver. He doesn't need to, he'll want to anyway. She paused, and so will I, properly. When this is all finished and we're safe and Edmund is home and the baby is born and everything is settled. That's a lot of conditions, yes? But I'm patient. I looked at this woman who'd refused to give up, who'd walked through a blizzard, who'd given birth in a cave, who'd taken on a corrupt judge and won. So am I said. Harriet appeared beside her mother. Mr. Wade, when you're a deputy, will you teach me to shoot? Properly, your father will teach you, but if he can't, if he's busy, will you? I looked at Sarah. She nodded. Yes, I told Harriet, I'll teach you. Clara tugged on my sleeve. And me. You're 6 years old. I'll be 7 soon, still too young. But when I'm old enough? When you're old enough, yes, she smiled. Okay. 2 weeks later, we loaded Sarah and the girls into a wagon. Hayes had arranged for a military escort to Denver, 6 soldiers, full protection. Sarah was stronger now. The baby had stopped threatening to come early. Dr. Morrison had cleared her for travel, with conditions. Edmund was waiting in Denver. Garrett Foss had already published 3 articles about Beach's land fraud. The entire country was paying attention. Beach had been arrested. Formal charges filed. Trial set for spring. It was really over. I helped Sarah into the wagon. Made sure the girls were settled. As they prepared to leave, Sarah leaned out. "You're not coming. My job is here now. But you'll visit. When the baby comes, I'll visit, you promise, I promise." She reached down, took my hand, squeezed it. "Thank you, Colton Wade, for everything. Thank you for knocking on my door, even though you didn't want to answer it, especially because I didn't want to answer it." The wagon pulled away. Harriet and Clara waved from the back. I waved back. Hayes came to stand beside me. "You did good. We did good. Think you'll regret staying here. Small town, quiet life." I watched the wagon disappear around the bend. "I've had enough of quiet," I said. "I think I'm ready for something else." "Like what?" "Like being useful. Like protecting people who can't protect themselves. Like maybe making up for some of the mistakes I made when I was too young and too stupid to know better." Hayes clapped me on the shoulder. "Welcome to law enforcement, Deputy Wade." I looked at the badge he handed me. Same kind I'd carried 20 years ago. Same weight, same responsibility. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't running from anything. I was running towards something. And that made all the difference. Spring came to Redemption Falls the way it always did in the high country. Slowly, reluctantly, like the mountains weren't quite ready to let go of winter yet. I'd been wearing the deputy's badge for 3 months when the telegram arrived. It came on a Tuesday morning, late April. The snow had finally melted from the main street, but the peaks were still white. Sheriff Hayes handed me the yellow paper without a word. I read it twice to make sure I understood. Edmund Bennett acquitted of all charges. Stop. Judge Harlan Beach convicted on 17 counts federal corruption. Stop. Sentenced to 20 years hard labor. Stop. Sarah Bennett delivered healthy baby girl. Stop. Mother and child doing well. Stop. Request your presence in Denver at earliest convenience. Stop. Garrett Foss, Denver Post. I looked up at Hayes. He was smiling. "Looks like your friends want to see you." "Looks like." "You going?" I thought about it. Thought about the past 3 months. The quiet work of being a deputy in a small town. Breaking up fights at the saloon. Helping Mrs. Henderson find her lost cow. Teaching young Tom Miller that stealing chickens was a poor life choice. Thought about the letters that had arrived every week from Denver. Sarah's handwriting. Updates on the trial. On Edmund's recovery from 6 months of captivity. On Harriet and Clara settling into a real school for the first time in their lives. On the baby growing inside her. "Yeah," I said, "I'm going." Hayes nodded. "Take as long as you need. I'll be back in a week." "I know you will. This is home now." He was right about that. I took the afternoon stage to Cheyenne. From there, the train to Denver. 2 days of travel. Time to think about what I'd say when I saw them again. Time to wonder if Edmund Bennett would want to shake my hand or punch me in the face for putting his pregnant wife through hell. Time to question whether I deserved any of the gratitude they seemed determined to give me. The train pulled into Denver's Union Station just after dawn on a Thursday. The city had grown since I'd last been here. More buildings, more people. The smell of coal smoke and horse manure and too many humans living too close together. I'd gotten used to the clean air of the mountains. This felt like drowning. I found a hotel near the station, cleaned up, changed into the one decent suit I owned, looked at myself in the mirror. 42 years old, gray starting to show in my beard, lines around my eyes that hadn't been there 12 years ago. The face of a man who'd spent too long hiding and was still learning how to be seen. I put on the deputy's badge, straightened my collar. Time to face the music. The Denver Post occupied a 3-story building on Larimer Street. Busy, loud. The sound of printing presses rattling the windows. I walked in and asked for Garrett Foss. The clerk looked at my badge, looked at my face, said 3rd floor, corner office. He's expecting you. I climbed the stairs, found the office, knocked. A voice called out, "Come in." Garrett Foss was younger than I expected, maybe 40. sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, ink stains on his fingers, the look of a man who lived on coffee and deadlines. He stood when I entered, extended his hand. "Deputy Wade, thank you for coming. Mr. Foss. Call me Garrett. Anyone who helped bring down Harlan Beach is a friend of mine." We shook. He gestured to a chair. As I sat, he pulled out a thick folder. The Beach case. 17 counts. We published every detail. The trial was a circus. Beach's lawyers tried every trick in the book, but the evidence was too solid. Edmund Bennett's documentation was flawless. How is Bennett? Recovering. 6 months in captivity took a toll, but he's tough, and he's got something to live for now. Foss opened the folder, pulled out a photograph. "Sarah asked me to give you this." I took it. A family portrait. Edmund and Sarah sitting. Edmund looked thinner than I'd imagined, harder, but his eyes were clear, alive. Sarah was holding a baby, 8 months old now, dark curls like her mother's, eyes that looked straight at the camera without fear. Standing behind them were Harriet and Clara. Harriet looked older somehow, more confident. Clara was smiling, actually smiling. "That's Emma," Foss said, born April 3rd, 7 pounds 2 ounces, healthy as a horse according to the doctor. Emma Bennett, named after Edmund's mother. Sarah said the baby was born during your journey to Redemption Falls. Thought you'd appreciate knowing the family's complete now. I stared at the photograph, at this family that shouldn't exist. That should have died in that blizzard. That should have been crushed by Beach's machine. But they'd survived, and they'd won. "Where are they now?" I asked. "The Bennetts have a house on the east side of town. Edmund's working with the territorial marshal's office, helping clean up the rest of Beach's network. Turns out Beach wasn't working alone. How many others? At least a dozen judges and marshals across the territories. Maybe more. It's going to take years to unravel all of it." Foss leaned back in his chair. "But that's not why I asked you here," he continued. "I want to write your story. My story. The man who came out of hiding after 12 years to save a family. The man who took down Vance Cutter single-handed. The man who made all of this possible. Sarah made it possible. I just kept her alive." That's not how she tells it. "According to Sarah, you risked everything. Burned your own home. Killed 2 men. Dragged Cutter 30 miles with a shattered leg. I did what needed doing." Exactly. And people need to hear about that. They need to know that one man can make a difference. That the system can work when good people choose to act. I don't want to be a story. Too late, you already are. I'm just asking permission to tell it right. I looked at the photograph again, at Clara's smile, at Emma in Sarah's arms, at Edmund's hand on his wife's shoulder. "Tell Sarah's story," I said. "Tell Edmund's. They're the heroes. I'm just the man who answered the door." Foss studied me for a long moment, then he nodded. "Fair enough, but I'm still mentioning you. The public has a right to know who their protectors are." He stood, extended his hand again. "The Bennetts are expecting you for dinner tonight. 6 o'clock. I'll give you the address." I shook his hand, took the paper he offered. "Deputy Wade, one more thing." "Yes. Thank you for reminding those of us who write about justice that sometimes it actually happens." I left the Denver Post and walked the streets for hours, trying to reconcile the city's noise and chaos with the silence of the mountains I'd left behind. Trying to figure out what I'd say to Edmund Bennett when I met him. Trying to understand why my hands were shaking. 6 o'clock came too fast. The Bennett house was modest. 2 stories, white paint, a porch with a swing, a fence that needed mending. The kind of place a deputy marshal could afford on government salary. The kind of place where a family could heal. I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute before I could make myself walk to the door. I knocked. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Harriet stood there. She'd grown. 3 months, and she looked a year older, taller, hair pulled back in a neat braid, wearing a dress that actually fit instead of the worn too small clothes she'd had in the mountains. "Mr. Wade," she said. Her voice was formal. "Careful." "Harriet." She looked at me for a long moment, then she smiled, threw her arms around my waist. "I told Papa you'd come," she said into my chest. "I told him you always keep your promises." I put a hand on her head, didn't trust myself to speak. She pulled back, looked up at me. "Come in. Everyone's waiting." The interior was warm, lived in. Furniture that didn't match but didn't need to. Pictures on the walls, books on shelves, the smell of something cooking, the smell of home. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She stopped when she saw me. Colton. Sarah. We stared at each other. 3 months since I'd seen her. 3 months since I'd put her on that wagon and watched her leave. She looked different, healthier, the exhaustion gone from her eyes, her hair longer, no longer the desperate fugitive I'd sheltered. Just a woman, a mother, someone who'd been through hell and come out the other side. She crossed the room, hugged me, hard. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "You don't need to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do. Every day for the rest of my life wouldn't be enough." She pulled back. Her eyes were bright. "Come meet Edmund." He was in the parlor, sitting in a chair by the window. He stood when I entered. Edmund Bennett was 31 years old, but looked older. The kind of aging that comes from suffering, not time. Thin, scars on his wrists from shackles, a slight limp when he walked. But his handshake was firm, his eyes were clear. "Deputy Wade," he said, "I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You don't owe me anything. I owe you my family, that's everything." We stood there, two men who'd never met, but were connected by the women they'd tried to protect. "Sarah told me what you did," Edmund continued, "how you sheltered them, fought for them, risked your life. I did what anyone would do." "No, you did what most people wouldn't. You chose to get involved when walking away would have been safer. That takes courage. Or stupidity." Edmund smiled. It was a tired smile, maybe both, but I'll take it either way. Clara appeared in the doorway. She was holding a baby, carefully, like she'd been taught. "Mr. Wade," she said. Her voice still had that rough quality, like speaking was still new, still unfamiliar. "Want to meet Emma?" I crossed the room, looked down at the baby in Clara's arms. Emma Bennett, 8 months old, sleeping, oblivious to everything she'd been through before she was even born. "She's beautiful," I said. "She looks like Mama," Clara said, "but she cries like Papa." Edmund laughed. "That's accurate." Clara held the baby out. "Want to hold her?" "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "I'm not good with babies." "You delivered Emma, Mama told me, in the cabin during the blizzard." "That was different. That was an emergency. This is an emergency too. My arms are tired." She pushed the baby into my arms before I could protest. I found myself holding Emma Bennett, one hand under her head, one under her back, the way I'd held her that night in the cabin. The baby stirred, opened her eyes, dark eyes, like her mother's. She looked at me, didn't cry, just looked. "She likes you," Clara said. "She doesn't know me." Babies know things. They can tell who's safe. Sarah appeared beside me, put a hand on my shoulder. "Clara's right. Babies know." Dinner was beef stew and fresh bread, simple food, but it tasted like a feast after 3 months of my own cooking. We sat around the table, Edmund and Sarah at the ends, Harriet and Clara on one side, me on the other, Emma in a cradle nearby. A family, plus one deputy who didn't quite know where he fit. Edmund led the conversation, asked about Redemption Falls, about Sheriff Hayes, about the work I was doing. I kept my answers short, didn't want to talk about myself. But Harriet had other ideas. "Mr. Wade is teaching me to shoot," she announced. "Papa said it's okay." Edmund nodded. I did. Every marshal's daughter should know how to protect herself. "I'm getting good," Harriet continued. "I can hit a target at 50 yards now. That's because she practices every day," I said. "Rain or shine. Papa says practice makes permanent, not perfect. So you have to practice the right way. Your father's a smart man." Edmund looked at me across the table. "Sarah told me you were a bounty hunter before, that you tracked men across the territories. Long time ago. Why did you stop?" I was quiet for a moment. Sarah knew the answer, but Edmund deserved to hear it from me. "I made a mistake," I said. "Handed a family over to a corrupt marshal. Man named Vance Cutter." Edmund's face went still. "Cutter." "Yes." "He killed them." "Yes." Edmund set down his fork. "How long ago?" 12 years. The same year, Cutter started working for Beach. I hadn't known that, but it made sense. After that, I continued. I quit. Walked away from bounty work. Walked away from everything. Spent 12 years in the mountains telling myself I was done with the world. "And then we knocked on your door," Sarah said softly. "And then you knocked on my door." Edmund looked at his wife, then at his daughters, then back at me. "Do you believe in Providence, Deputy Wade?" "I don't know, maybe." "I do. I believe God puts people in our path when we need them most. You were in that cabin for a reason. We found you for a reason. Or I just got lucky. Maybe, but I prefer to think it was more than luck. Clara spoke up. I think the mountain sent you. Everyone looked at her. What do you mean, sweetheart? Sarah asked. Clara looked at me with those serious eyes. Mr. Wade said he went to the mountain to hide, but the mountain kept him there until we needed him. The mountain was waiting. Out of the mouths of babes, Edmund raised his glass. Water, not wine. He was a careful man. To the mountain, he said, and to the man who answered when it called. We drank. After dinner, Edmund and I sat on the porch while Sarah put the girls to bed. The night was cool, clear, stars coming out. Edmund lit a pipe, offered it to me. I shook my head. Tell me about Cutter, Edmund said. When you fought him. What do you want to know? Did he suffer? I thought about that. About Cutter screaming as I dragged him through the snow with a shattered leg. About the look in his eyes when he realized I wasn't going to kill him, that I was going to make him face justice instead. Yes, I said, he suffered. Good. Edmund smoked for a while. Then he said I was in that cell for 6 months. Beach came to see me twice, once at the beginning, once at the end. What did he say? At the beginning, he offered me a deal, give him the evidence, walk away. He'd relocate my family, new names, new lives. All I had to do was forget what I'd seen. And you said no. I said no, because if I'd said yes, I'd have to spend the rest of my life looking at my daughters and knowing I taught them that truth doesn't matter, that you can compromise with evil if the price is right. That's a hard thing to live by. Yes, but it's harder to live without it. What did he say the second time? The second time was different. This was after your telegram reached Denver, after Garrett Foss published the first story. Beach was furious. He told me Sarah was dead, that Cutter had found her and the girls, that it was my fault for being stubborn. Did you believe him? For about 5 minutes. Then I realized that if Sarah was really dead, Beach wouldn't be here gloating. He'd be celebrating. The fact that he was angry meant she was still out there, still fighting. So you held on. So I held on. And 3 days later, federal marshals came for me, told me I was being transferred to protective custody, told me my wife and daughters were safe in Redemption Falls, told me a deputy named Colton Wade had dragged Vance Cutter out of the mountains and dumped him at the sheriff's feet. Edmund looked at me. That's when I knew we'd won. We sat in silence for a while. Then Edmund said, "What will you do now? Stay in Redemption Falls." That's the plan. It's a good town, good people. Hayes is a good man to work for. You could do more, you know. The Territorial Marshal Service is hiring. We need men who can't be bought. Men who've proven they'll do the right thing when it costs them everything. I'm not a marshal. Neither was I, once. Then I decided I wanted to be part of the solution instead of just complaining about the problem. I thought about that, about the past 3 months wearing a deputy's badge, about the satisfaction of helping people, of being useful, about the difference between hiding from the world and engaging with it. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I ask. The door opened. Sarah came out, Emma in her arms. Girls are asleep, she said. Finally. Harriet wanted to show you her schoolwork, but I told her it could wait until morning. She sat in the swing, started rocking gently. Emma made a small sound, settled. Edmund stood. I should check on Clara. She's been having nightmares again. He went inside, left Sarah and me alone. She looked at me in the starlight. You look good, Colton. The deputy's badge suits you. Feels strange, after 12 years of nothing, wearing a badge again. Strange good or strange bad? Haven't decided yet. She smiled. You will. We rocked in silence, the baby sleeping, the night settling. I wanted to ask you something, Sarah said, about that night, in the cabin, when Emma was born, with Harriet and Clara watching. I paused. You mean when you gave birth, in the cabin, with Harriet and Clara watching? She nodded. Yes, that night. You told me to hold on, that I wasn't allowed to die on your floor. Why did you say that? Because I meant it. But why? You didn't know me, didn't owe me anything. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, because 12 years ago I let people die who shouldn't have. And I spent 12 years telling myself there was nothing I could have done, that the system was too big, too corrupt, that one man couldn't make a difference. And then you knocked on my door, and I had a choice. Let you die and prove myself right, or save you and maybe prove myself wrong." Sarah's eyes were bright. "And which did you prove?" "I don't know yet, but I'm glad I got the chance to find out." She reached over, took my hand. "We're naming the baby after you," she said. I looked at her. "What?" "Emma. Her middle name is Colton, Emma Colton Bennett." "You can't do that. Colton's not a girl's name." "It is now." "Sarah. Edmund and I discussed it. We wanted her to carry the name of the man who saved her family, so that when she's old enough to ask where she came from, we can tell her the whole story. And she'll understand that sometimes heroes don't look like heroes. They look like men who've made mistakes and are trying to make up for them." I didn't know what to say. Sarah smiled. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise you'll be part of her life. Visit when you can. Let her know the man she's named after." "I promise." "Good." Emma stirred, started to fuss. Sarah stood. "I should get her inside. But Colton, thank you not just for saving us, for showing my daughters that good men still exist." She went inside. I sat on the porch alone, looking at the stars, thinking about the past 3 months, the past 12 years, the past 20 years of my life. Thinking about how a single knock on a door in the middle of a blizzard had changed everything. The door opened again. Clara appeared, rubbing her eyes. "Mr. Wade, you're still here." "I'm still here." "Are you leaving tomorrow?" "Probably." She climbed into my lap, put her head on my chest. "I don't want you to leave. I have to go back to work. Sheriff Hayes needs me." "Will you come visit?" "Yes. Promise." "Promise." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you answered the door that night." "Me too, even though you didn't want to." "Especially because I didn't want to." "Why?" "Because sometimes the things we don't want to do are the things we need to do most." She thought about that, then nodded, like it made perfect sense. We sat together until Edmund came looking for her, carried her back to bed. I walked back to my hotel through Denver's streets, thinking about a little girl named Emma Colton Bennett, who would grow up hearing stories about a man who lived in the mountains, wondering if I'd live up to the story, wondering if anyone ever did. I stayed in Denver for 3 more days. On the second day, Garrett Foss published his article. Front page of the Denver Post. The headline read, "The Mountain Man Who Brought Down a Judge." He'd kept his word. Most of the story focused on Sarah and Edmund, on the evidence, on the trial, on Beach's conviction. But there was a section about me, about the cabin, about the fight with Cutter, about the choice to help instead of hide. It was fair, honest, made me sound braver than I felt. Sheriff Hayes sent a telegram, saw the article. "Stop. Town council wants to give you a medal." "Stop. I told them you'd rather have a raise." "Stop." They said no. "Stop." I smiled when I read that. On the 3rd day, Edmund took me to the federal building, introduced me to Marshal Thomas Greer, head of the Territorial Marshal Service. Greer was 60, gray beard, eyes that had seen everything twice. He looked at my deputy's badge. "Hayes speaks highly of you," he said. "Hayes is a good man. He says you're wasting your talents in Redemption Falls. It's a good town." "It is. But the territories need more than good deputies in good towns. We need men who can't be bought. Men who'll do the right thing when everyone's telling them to do the easy thing." He pushed a paper across his desk. "That's a commission. Territorial Marshal, full authority across Wyoming, Montana, Dakota territories, same pay as Edmund, better than a deputy's salary." I looked at the paper, didn't touch it. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you've already proven you'll burn your own life down to do what's right. That's the kind of man we need. I spent 12 years hiding from the world, and then you came back to it. That's what matters." I looked at Edmund. He nodded. "Take some time," Greer said. "Think about it, but we need an answer within the month." I took the paper, folded it, put it in my pocket. On my last day in Denver, I went back to the Bennett house. One more dinner, one more evening with this family that had become something I didn't have a name for. Not my family, but not strangers either. Something in between. After dinner, Harriet asked if I'd read to Clara, same as I did that night in the mountains. We sat in the parlor, Clara curled against my side, Harriet on the other side, Emma in Sarah's arms across the room, Edmund in his chair smoking his pipe. I read from the same book of folk tales, the story about the girl who got lost in the woods, who followed the trail of stones home. When I finished, Clara said, "That's my favorite." "Why?" "Because she was scared, but she didn't give up, and she found her way home." "That's a good reason." Clara looked up at me. "Do you have a home, Mr. Wade?" I thought about that, about the cabin that had burned, about the mountains I'd left behind, about Redemption Falls with its quiet streets and simple problems, about this house in Denver where a family had rebuilt their lives after everything had tried to destroy them. "Yes," I said, "I think I do." "Where is it?" I looked at Sarah, at Edmund, at the 3 girls who'd walked out of a blizzard and into my life. "I'm still figuring that out," I said, "but I'm getting closer." The next morning I took the train back to Cheyenne, then the stage to Redemption Falls. Hayes was waiting at the sheriff's office when I arrived. "How was Denver?" he asked. "Complicated. Most things worth doing are." I pulled out the commission, set it on his desk. "Marshal Greer made me an offer." Hayes looked at the paper, didn't pick it up. "You going to take it?" "I don't know." "What's stopping you?" "This town, this job, you." Hayes smiled. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in years." "I mean it. You gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. You earned it." We sat in silence for a while. Then Hayes said, "Can I give you some advice?" "Always. Take the job." I looked at him. "This town will be fine," Hayes continued. "I'll find another deputy. But the territories need men like you, men who've made mistakes and learned from them, men who know what it costs to do the right thing." "You sound like Edmund Bennett." "Edmund Bennett is a smart man. Listen to him." "What about you? What do you need?" Hayes leaned back in his chair. "I need to know that the men I trained are out there making a difference, that this job I've been doing for 40 years still matters. You can give me that." I thought about the Kruger family, about Peter's open eyes, about 12 years of running, about Sarah and her daughters, about Edmund in that cell, about the choice to answer the door. "I'll think about it," I said. "That's all I ask." I spent the next 2 weeks working, routine deputy work, settling disputes, keeping the peace, helping Mrs. Henderson find her cow again. Simple work, honest work. But I kept thinking about Greer's offer, about the territories, about the men like Beach who were still out there, still hurting people, still winning because good men chose to do nothing. The decision came on a Tuesday. I was making rounds when I saw smoke rising from the Miller farm, 5 miles outside town. I rode hard, got there to find the barn on fire. Tom Miller, the kid who'd stolen chickens, was trying to put it out with a bucket. His mother was screaming. His little sister was inside. I didn't think. Ran into the burning barn, found the girl in a back stall, maybe 8 years old, unconscious from the smoke. I carried her out, got her breathing again. Doctor came, said she'd be fine. Tom Miller cried when he thanked me, said he'd been careless with a lamp, said it was his fault. I told him accidents happen. What matters is what you do after. That night I sat in the sheriff's office. Hayes was doing paperwork. "I'm taking the job," I said. Hayes looked up. "The Marshal Commission." "Yes." "When?" "End of the month. Greer wants me in Cheyenne for training. Then I'll be assigned to a circuit." "Where?" "Don't know yet. Wherever they need me." Hayes set down his pen, stood, extended his hand. "Proud of you, Colton." We shook. "I'll need to find your replacement," Hayes said. "Any suggestions?" "Tom Miller." "The chicken thief. The kid who ran into a burning barn to save his sister." Hayes nodded. "I'll talk to him." I spent my last 2 weeks in Redemption Falls saying goodbye to the people I'd helped, to the town I'd called home, to the version of myself who'd needed a quiet place to heal. On my last day, I packed my things, not much, same as when I'd arrived in the mountains 12 years ago. A bedroll, a rifle, a change of clothes, and a photograph, the Bennett family. Sarah had sent it with a note. "So you remember what you're fighting for." I looked at that photograph for a long time, at Clara's smile, at Emma in Sarah's arms, at Harriet standing tall, at Edmund's hand on his wife's shoulder, at the life they'd built after everything had tried to destroy it. I put the photograph in my pack, mounted my horse. Hayes walked me to the edge of town. "You'll do good work," he said. "I hope so." "No hoping. I know so. You're one of the good ones, Colton. Don't let anyone tell you different." "I'll try." "And come back to visit. Town'll miss you." "I'll miss it too." We shook hands one last time. Then I rode south, toward Cheyenne, toward whatever came next. 6 months later, I was riding circuit through Montana Territory, tracking a gang that had been robbing homesteaders. Small operations, families who couldn't fight back. Sound familiar? I caught them outside a mining camp called Silver Creek. 3 men. Same pattern as Beach. Forge documents, claim the land, force the families out. But this time, there was someone there to stop them. I brought them in, testified at their trial, watched them get convicted, watched justice actually work. After the trial, I sent a telegram to Sarah, told her about the case, about the families who got to keep their land. She wrote back, "Edmund says you're becoming exactly what the territories need, a man who remembers what it costs when good people do nothing. Tell him I learned from the best." I spent the next 2 years riding circuit, Montana, Wyoming, Dakota, wherever Marshal Greer sent me. I stopped land fraud, broke up claim-jumping operations, protected families who couldn't protect themselves, did the work Edmund Bennett had started, that the Kruger family had died for, that Sarah and her daughters had nearly died for, did the work I should have been doing all along. And every town I rode into, I thought about that night in the mountains, about the knock on the door, about the choice to answer it instead of hiding, about how sometimes the things we don't want to do are exactly what we need to do. In the spring of 1890, I got a letter from Sarah. "Colton, Emma is 2 years old now. She asks about you constantly, about the mountain man who saved her family. Harriet is 14, top of her class, wants to be a lawyer. Clara is 11, reading everything she can get her hands on, still quiet, but happy. Edmund is doing well. He's training new marshals now, teaching them to be men like you. We're having a dinner, our house, June 15th, to celebrate the anniversary of Beach's conviction, to remember how far we've come. Please come. The girls miss you. I miss you. Edmund wants to hear your stories. And Emma needs to meet the man she's named after." I read that letter 3 times. Then I sent a telegram to Marshal Greer, requested leave, June 15th. He approved it without question. I arrived in Denver on a Thursday. The city had grown again, more people, more noise, more chaos. But the Bennett house was the same. White paint, porch swing, fence that still needed mending. I knocked. The door flew open. Clara stood there, 11 years old now, taller, hair longer, eyes that were no longer old, just young, the way they should have been all along. "Mr. Wade," she shrieked, threw her arms around me. Behind her, Harriet appeared, 14, poised, beautiful. The soldier girl replaced by a young woman who looked like she could take on the world. "Deputy Wade," she said. Her voice was formal, but her eyes were smiling, or should I say Marshal Wade now. I hugged them both. Sarah came to the door, 33 now, gray starting in her hair, lines around her eyes, the marks of a life fully lived. And in her arms, a little girl, 2 years old, dark hair, Sarah's eyes. Emma Colton Bennett. Sarah set her down. Emma looked at me, solemn. Then she said, "You're the mountain man." "That's right. Mama says you saved us. I helped." She said, "You're the bravest person she knows." "Your mama exaggerates." "No, I don't," Sarah said. "I tell the truth." Emma took my hand. "Come meet Papa." Edmund was in the parlor, 35 now, the scars faded, but not gone. Still thin, still carrying the weight of 6 months in captivity. But his eyes were clear, his smile was real. "Marshal Wade," he said, "welcome home." Home. I thought about that word, about what it meant, about the cabin I'd burned, about Redemption Falls I'd left behind, about the mountains that had kept me prisoner for 12 years, about this house in Denver where a family had rebuilt their lives, where 3 girls had grown up knowing they were loved, where 2 people had refused to let evil win, about the photograph I carried, about the letters I'd received, about the work I did every day to make sure what happened to the Kruger family never happened again. "Yeah," I said, "home." Dinner was celebration, beef roast, fresh vegetables, pie made by Harriet, who'd learned to cook from her mother. We sat around the table. The family that shouldn't exist, the marshal who'd stopped hiding, the story that had started with a knock in a blizzard. Edmund led a toast to absent friends, to justice, to the long road we walked to get here. We drank. After dinner, the girls showed me their schoolwork, Harriet's essays, Clara's drawings, Emma's attempts at writing her letters. Edmund and I sat on the porch, smoked, talked about the work, about the cases, about the slow grinding progress of making the territory safer. Sarah joined us, sat in the swing, "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, answering the door that night. "Every day." She looked surprised. I smiled. Every day I regret not doing it sooner, not being this version of myself 12 years ago. Think of all the people I could have helped if I hadn't spent so long hiding. "You weren't ready," Edmund said. "Sometimes we have to walk through darkness before we can appreciate the light." Maybe. We sat in silence, watching the stars come out. Then Emma appeared, climbed into my lap. "Tell me a story," she said, "about the mountains." "What kind of story?" "The one where you saved my family." I looked at Sarah, at Edmund. They nodded. So I told her. I told her about the blizzard, about the knock, about her mother on the porch with her sisters, about Clara's silence, about Harriet's courage, about the long walk to Redemption Falls. I told her about Vance Cutter, about Judge Beach, about the fight to make sure justice won. I told her about the cabin that burned, about the choice to stop hiding, about the mountain that had kept me until the moment I was needed. I told her the truth. And when I finished, Emma looked at me with her mother's eyes and said, "You're a hero." "No," I said, "I'm just a man who answered a door." "That's what heroes do," she said. "They answer when people need help, out of the mouths of babes." I stayed in Denver for a week, spent time with the family, played with Emma, talked law with Harriet, read with Clara, sat on the porch with Edmund and Sarah, and remembered how far we'd all come. On my last night, Sarah walked me to the hotel. We stood under the gas lamps, the city quiet for once. "Thank you," she said, "for being part of our lives, for showing my daughters what a good man looks like. Thank you for knocking on my door." She smiled, even though you didn't want to answer it. Especially because I didn't want to answer it. She hugged me, held on tight. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "Come back soon," she said. "The girls need to see you, to remember that the world still has protectors." "I will. Promise. Promise." I left Denver the next morning, rode north, back to the circuit, back to the work. But I carried something with me now, something I hadn't had in 12 years. Purpose. The knowledge that one man could make a difference, that the system could work when good people chose to act, that justice was possible if you were willing to fight for it. The knowledge that sometimes the things we don't want to do are exactly what we need to do, that sometimes a knock in a storm changes everything. 5 years later, I was appointed head of the Territorial Marshal Service, succeeded Thomas Greer when he retired. Edmund became my deputy director. Together, we cleaned up the corruption that Beach had started. We trained new marshals. We protected families. We made sure the territories became safer. We did the work. Harriet graduated law school, became the first female prosecutor in Wyoming, tried cases alongside the marshals her father and I trained. Clara became a teacher, taught children to read and write, to find their voices when the world tried to silence them. Emma grew up knowing her family's story, knowing what it cost, knowing that good people had fought for her before she was even born. And she became a marshal herself, following in her father's footsteps, in mine, carrying on the work. Sarah lived to see all 3 of her daughters become exactly what she'd hoped they'd be: strong, brave, unbreakable. She lived to see the territories become safer, to see Beach die in prison, to see the system she'd fought to fix actually start to work. She lived to see justice win. And when she died peaceful in her sleep at the age of 68, surrounded by her family, her last words were about that night in the mountains, about the knock, about the man who answered. Edmund told me this at her funeral. He said she smiled when she said it, said she'd been right all along, that the mountain had kept me there until they needed me, that Providence had put us in each other's path, that some things were meant to be. I stood at her grave, looked at the headstone, Sarah Bennett, beloved wife, mother, fighter, and below that a quote she'd chosen herself. Some truths are worth dying for, but living for them is harder and better. Edmund stood beside me, 71 years old now, white-haired, bent, but still standing. "She loved you," he said, "not the way she loved me, but she loved you, for giving us a chance when we had none. I loved her too, all of you. We know." The girls appeared, Harriet, Clara, Emma, all grown now, all carrying pieces of their mother's strength. They stood with us, a family forged in fire, tempered by suffering, made stronger by it. We buried Sarah Bennett in the Denver cemetery. under the blue sky she'd fought so hard to see. And I went back to the work, because that's what she would have wanted. That's what all of them would have wanted. To keep fighting, to keep protecting, to keep answering the door when people knocked, even when we didn't want to, especially when we didn't want to. I'm 83 years old now, retired from the marshal service, living in a small house outside Denver. The territories are states now: Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas. The wild has been tamed, the corruption cleaned up, the work done. But I still carry that photograph, the Bennett family, Sarah and Edmund and the 3 girls. I still remember the knock. And every time someone asks me about my life, about the work I did, about the difference I made, I tell them the same thing. I tell them about a blizzard, about a woman and 2 children, about a choice to answer the door instead of hiding, about how sometimes the things we don't want to do are exactly what we need to do, about how one moment can change everything, if we're brave enough to let it. Emma comes to visit me every week. She's a retired marshal herself now, 53 years old, gray in her hair, her mother's eyes, her father's strength. My strength, she says, but I don't see it. We sit on my porch, drink coffee, watch the sun set over the mountains, those same mountains that kept me prisoner for 12 years. That answered when Sarah knocked. That gave me back my life by forcing me to stop running from it. Tell me the story again, Emma says, the one about the night we met. You've heard it 100 times. Tell me anyway. So I do. I tell her about the bullet through the door, about her mother on the porch, about Clara's silence and Harriet's courage, about the long walk to Redemption Falls, about the fight for justice, about the choice to be better than I'd been. I tell her the truth. And when I finish, Emma takes my hand. You saved us, she says. I shake my head. Your mother saved you, your father, your sisters. I just answered the door. That's what heroes do, Emma says. The exact same thing her 2-year-old self said 40 years ago. I don't argue anymore. Because maybe she's right. Maybe heroism isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up when people need you, even when you're broken, even when you're scared, even when you've spent 12 years running from the world. Maybe heroism is just answering the door. When the mountain calls, when the storm brings what you need, when Providence puts people in your path who change everything. I close my eyes, feel the sun on my face, the coffee warm in my hands, Emma's presence beside me. And I think about that night, about the knock, about the choice that saved 4 lives and gave me back mine, about how the weight of snow eventually melts, about how the mountain always answers, if you're willing to listen. The end.